Welcome to the Frontline with FPM, where we talk about California politics, homeschool freedom, parental rights, and the family. I'm your host, Nathan Pierce, and thanks for joining us today. Let's jump right in and see what's going on here on the Frontline. Well, good morning, everybody. Clearly, I am not Nathan Pierce. Nathan is actually out this week along with the legislature. So I am here in his stead giving a little update. If you don't know me, I'm Drew. I am Nathan's legislative analyst. I work for FPM, finding and tracking and kind of doing a lot of the behind the scenes work on bills along with Nathan. So today, for this little bit of a briefer episode, I'm going to give a little bit of an explanation on what I do and what FPM does on the more technical side in terms of finding legislation and determining whether or not it's a problem, and then following it all the way through the process to make sure that it's not a threat to homeschooling. And beyond just homeschooling, there's a number of issues that we focus on, in terms of individual and family freedom and religious liberty, among a plethora of other issues. So to do that, to explain a little bit of how this process works and what it looks like for us at FPM, I'm going to go over one particular bill that we have been tracking since the day it was introduced. And it actually has a bit of a happy ending. So the bill that I am going to be discussing today is AB 659. If you've been watching the Frontline at all or listening to the Frontline at all, I'm sure you've heard Nathan talk about it. It is a bill that would mandate the HPV vaccine for students entering the 8th grade. And this would apply to public and private schools. So when it was introduced, it originally would have created kind of an odd requirement, saying that schools are required to tell parents, hey, this is required and you're going to have to get this within the next 2 years. So as originally written, the bill would require schools to give parents a notification saying, hey, your kid's in 6th grade now. By 8th grade, they need to be vaccinated for HPV. The way that the bill was worded, again, was very awkward. The way it was set up was that parents privately homeschooling their own children would be required to notify themselves. So that's one of those issues that kind of comes up when there's confusion on the author's office's part about what the law concerning private schools is, because a lot of them don't actually understand how homeschools operate, how private schools operate, because in California, homeschools operate under the private school umbrella. So a lot of requirements are split between home-based private schools, which is a homeschool, and campus-based private school, which is something like, a traditional private school or a PSP, which files on behalf of a whole bunch of individual families. So this bill, when it was introduced, would have added HPV to the list of required vaccines, along with, diphtheria, tetanus, MMR, things like that, the kind of routine ones that you get in 7th grade for most public schools. But it faced immediate opposition. And a big part of this was kind of a combination of a lot more awareness on behalf of parents about vaccine mandates and things like that, especially since COVID happened and there was a lot of attempted mandates for even very young children, as young as 6 months, for the COVID vaccine. And a lot of parents were uneasy about that. And also, HPV is technically an STD. And so it brought up a lot of concerns for parents saying, why would my 12, 13, 14-year-old need this? I don't think they should be required to have this. And so the bill had a lot of opposition right away. So it was introduced February 9th, 2023. It was read that day, it went to print, which means it starts its process. It has to wait 31 days from the day it was introduced before it can move. That's a rule in the legislature. They often overrule it, but in this case, it had to wait 31 days. But on that day, February 9th, it showed up on the system that I use to find bills based on certain words, based on certain authors, based on kind of a number of factors that bring bills to our attention to try and sort through, the almost 3,000 that we have now this session. And right away I saw, okay, this is going to be a problem. Additional mandates are always a problem. So I immediately brought it to Nathan and we started working on opposition points. So we got in touch with the author's office, got fact sheets, got information on the bill, went through code sections that it relates to, and figured out, okay, what does this initial language actually do? Is it actually a mandate, or is it a recommendation, or is it a suggestion? And because it was added to the actual list, the actual vaccine schedule, we found, okay, this is a mandate, and this is a problem. So we started working on opposition points. We got in touch with the author's office. We started tracking it for hearings to see, okay, can we speak in opposition to this? Can we send these letters in or these opposition points in to the committees before the hearings, so that the committee members have some understanding of what problems people have with it. And from there, since that day, February 9th, it's been heard 6 times, and it's been amended 5 times. And so each time it would, this bill was interesting in the fact that any time it was amended, the author was trying to solve the problem that people had with it while still getting what the sponsors of the bill want, which is more students taking the HPV vaccine. And this one in particular, each time there was an amendment, it seemed to solve one problem and create another. So we worked with the author's office on explaining how private school law works, to explain, hey, this bill is a requirement for parents to notify themselves. This doesn't make any sense. We want you to exempt home-based private schools, or even better, private schools altogether, or maybe even just get rid of the requirement for everybody. And so throughout that process, there was a whole bunch of back and forth. We would take 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And the last time it was amended, it was on July 3rd. The bill it was almost unrecognizable. It had morphed from, this is an added schedule item to the vaccine schedule, to, hey, this is now going to be a recommended vaccine for students, saying we're going to notify parents, saying, hey, we recommend instead of require that your student be vaccinated. So there's still some concern over the actual logistics of it. What do they mean by recommendation? Because we saw during COVID, there were a lot of recommendations that ended up being enforced as law, as a requirement. So we're not quite out of the woods yet, but this bill is a really good example, in my opinion, of something that we were able to work on behind the scenes, notify our supporters and our backers about, and explain to them, hey, this is our concern, this is the issue as it stands now. And people got in touch with committee members, people got in touch with their legislators who were on committees voting on it, people got in touch with their legislators that were just on the floor that would eventually vote on it. And all of that culminated in us having an opportunity to actually make headway on this bill, and keep tracking it, and keep whittling away at it in a way to get it to a point where we could say, okay, this is better. And for us at FPM, a lot of times there's bills that have so much support, especially with a supermajority in the legislature, that we aren't even shooting for killing a bill. We're just shooting for mitigating the damage that it can do. And that's, there's been some very encouraging examples of that. And it's in a lot of the most extraordinary cases. I think back to 2018 with AB 2926 and 2756 with the Turpin family case, which you can look that up and see FPM's work on that. It wasn't us alone that made that difference. It was, in that case, the hundreds of families that showed up in opposition to these bills. It was, the hundreds and thousands of calls that people sent in to these legislators and to their offices. And it was these average, everyday, local, and even non-local families that came in and said, hey, that's not going to work for us. So I think a good way to view it is kind of as an organism to itself. Seeing, FPM's work as kind of the ears to the ground, saying, hey, what's coming, and what could be a problem. So our job is to catch stuff early, and we've been very blessed to have caught a lot of these really bad bills early on. But the actual work, the actual hands that can effectuate change much more quickly than we can and much more effectively in large numbers than we can as just individual organization representatives, are families, the hands and the feet that run and give us that bring this to the attention of the legislators. Like Nathan and I have said many times, we can only do so much, and we do as much as we can, and we're always trying to do more. But when it comes to bills like this, when it comes to the other 20 or so that are on our top tier priority right now, I mean, we're tracking a couple hundred specifically, but our high priority list is about 20. It's typically, for reference, it's typically about 5 to 7. And so this has been a really busy year, but having people involved and having people really show an interest and place a high value on their family freedoms, their homeschool freedoms, their religious liberty, having those things be important to people, it makes what we do possible, and it makes it worth it. Because if we're fighting these bills on behalf of people that don't know or don't care, there's not much reason for us to do it, except, it's something to fill up time, which that's not why we do it. So just for a little bit of reference and a little bit of encouragement, I hope that you all can stay involved as the hands and feet, or get involved if you aren't. We'll keep our ears to the ground and try and keep you updated as frequently as possible on the threats to homeschool freedom, to religious liberty, to family independence, and we hope that you join us. So thank you for joining me on this mini episode of the Frontline. Nathan will be back next week, I believe, and we'll be going over, I think, where everything else stands right before the legislature comes back from their break. So things are slow. It's a mini break for the time being, but they're going to come back from break refreshed and ready to go full steam ahead to try and get as many of these bills across the finish line. So please continue to pray for us. Please continue to build relationships with your legislators and with their staff members and your capital and district offices. We have a lot of resources on how to do that on our website at fpmca.org. And you can also learn how to do that and more just by watching through all of the previous, we've had a lot of episodes of the Frontline. I can't even remember how many at this point. So all of those resources are available. I hope you take advantage of them, and hope you join us.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Frontline with FPM. For more information about the topics we discuss here, check out Family Protection Ministries at fpmca.org and subscribe to our channel.